Hello, welcome. This is my opportunity to share with you my journey with cancer, with the treatments, and also with Reiki. I'm so happy that we have this time together, and I would like to invite you to join me in a little bit of our practice by doing some self-treatment together. So close your eyes, put your hands on yourself, and feel the energy of Reiki flowing. I want to express my gratitude to Mikao Usui, Shijiro Hayashi, and Tawayo Takada, who brought this gift to me and to all of us. I give thanks to the masters who have touched us and brought us the gift of Reiki. And to the mystery that invites us all to be our authentic selves. Thank you. And now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about where I am, where I've been, and where I'm going. Well, this is a tough question. And when I first heard it, I was really astonished because there were lots of other conditions that I thought I might have that would come to me because I just turned 60, not this year, but last year. And for the time between my 60th birthday and the 11 months before I had the diagnosis of cancer, I had all kinds of nightmares and thoughts about being old and, having some kind of disease and wondering what that would be. But cancer was never one of them that I thought about, really. So when I went to have my annual checkup, and I had my mammogram, and they called me back, I thought, well, nothing's going to happen. And then all of a sudden, they were calling me to do an ultrasound and then a biopsy. And at the biopsy, I asked the woman who was the technician, because they did it with ultrasound, if they knew whether it was cancer or not at the time. And she said, well, yes, actually they did. And that what they were doing was testing for what kind of cancer it was and how, what the different stages of the cancer were. So that was really a shock. And I think that that shock lasted for about 2 weeks. And during that time, I had to drive from Idaho to Arizona, where I live now, which is about a 4-day drive. And I read a book by Thomas More called Care of the Soul. And it's one of my favorite books of all times. And the very first chapter of this book is Symptoms Are a Message from Our Soul. So that gave me a place to go with this diagnosis immediately, besides shock. And then very soon after that, a very dear friend of mine in Wales called me and she said, I've read this book, or I'm reading this book by Andreas Moritz. And the title of the book is Cancer is Not a Disease. So basically, the premise of this book is that cancer is a condition that is brought on by overstressed bodies. and that some of the stresses are emotional trauma, emotional repression, dehydration, uh, not getting enough deep sleep, being exposed to chemicals like cleaners and things that we actually are exposed to every day, heavy metals that are in our body, especially through our dental amalgam, uh, uh, inconsistent um inconsistent daily patterns, like for instance when we travel, and overeating, and a number of other things. I think there are about 12 of them. And when I read all of these, I could relate to 11 of them. So I just thought, well, no wonder my body has reacted in this way. And what he explains in the book, just very briefly, and I really recommend, if you are interested, to go on the internet and find him and his book. What he says is that cancer is a way for our bodies to respond. It's not something that our bodies are doing to kill the organism, because obviously we want to be alive, and our body wants to remain alive. So cancer is a reaction of our body to major stress, and it's a way for our body to protect itself, to keep alive. And what we can do in the meantime is to take care of those stresses. So immediately I changed my diet, and I did a lot of things that I felt like were going to start the road to having a less stressed body. But this, of course, I mean, this whole thing took many, many, many years to build up. So it's going to take some years to reverse it. It's not something that's going to be immediate. And that's one thing that I really thought about when I realized that I wanted to do surgery. There are many other possibilities of why I have cancer. I don't know. But I guess that it's an assumption when we practice Reiki that Reiki is going to save us. And this was a big question that I had when I was really a young Reiki student, because I kept thinking, well, does this make us immortal? Does this mean that we will always remain healthy? But of course, as human beings, we have our path, and our path is about choices. What we eat, how stressed we are, what kind of lifestyle we live, whether we repress our emotions, whether we're afraid of each other and our families. All these things come together to make us the human being that we are, and I am a human being. So now I'm learning what that's like, and this is my next chapter of being human. This is a very controversial question. And it was actually not even a question for me, which is amazing, especially the surgery, I would say. Um, when I found out that I had a tumor and I decided to do my treatment not in Idaho but in Arizona, I came down here to be in our Arizona home and went to the doctors that we found on the internet. There were 2 or 3 cancer clinics in Tucson, very close to where I live. And the one that we chose happens to be what is called an integrated medical facility, which means that they have on their program all the complementary therapies. Reiki is very well known there. When I went in and said, I want to be able to have Reiki right after the surgery and so on, they said, no problem, that's great, and that was really wonderful for me. So how did I get to surgery? Well, when I heard what they had to offer and I heard what was possible, I decided that surgery was the thing to do. So at the beginning, it was just this little tumor in my breast, and they were going to take it out, and then in the pocket of where the tumor was, I was going to have this little balloon put in, and then they would drop radiation into this balloon for 5 days, twice a day. And that was going to be it. That was my treatment. And after that, I just needed a lot of Reiki and time to turn around my body to get it de-stressed. So I was happy. It seemed like a perfect solution. But when I went in for surgery, they asked me if I wanted to have what is called the seminal lymph node checked, because that what they do is they put dye into my body, and then the track of where the tumor was goes directly to a lymph node, and there are lots of them. So the seminal lymph node is the first place that my lymph drains into. And so she checked that lymph node, and that had cancer. So that changed the whole picture. And she took 9 other lymph nodes, and luckily all the other lymph nodes are clear. So whew, that's done. But now, because the cancer has traveled, they're trying to do tests for to see of the other secondary places in my body where the cancer might have gone before I start my chemotherapy. So this particular process has not been easy, and as you know, Reiki can really do some really interesting things. So, you know, before when I had the surgery, they put, I had an MRI, they put an IV in my arm, no problem. Everything was fine. But after the surgery, I went in to have a CT scan and to have a bone scan, and my veins just closed up. They couldn't get a needle to work in any of my veins, and of course it's always in the left arm now, because my right arm they can't use for blood pressure and for intravenous stuff. So I have not had a CT scan yet because they haven't been able to do the colorant, and I just had a bone scan and then an accompanying MRI, and we'll see what happens with that. But I don't know, here I am back at the same place thinking that I'm not going to have anything else happening in my body with cancer. So we'll see. Meanwhile, however, a couple of weeks after I had my surgery, they really recommended chemotherapy, and that was because of some of the tests that had come back, blood tests and so on. So I just agonized over this decision because I had this trip to go to. I was leaving on September the 14th for Almaty, Kazakhstan for an 8-week tour in Europe, and they wanted to do chemotherapy. And that meant 1 day a week for 20 treatments over 24 weeks. That's a lot of months. So, and they needed to start it at the outside a month from when I had my surgery. So that meant that if I went on the trip, I had to cut it short, which is what I ended up doing. But this 2 or 3 days I had to make the decision, excuse me, the 2 or 3 days that I had to make the decision were agony. And I treated myself with Reiki. I had Reiki treatments. I had distant treatments, of course, coming from all over the world. I felt like I was just floating in this ocean of Reiki, and I was a mess. So finally, luckily, I had a group of people here who were meeting for a board meeting for the Reiki Alliance, and I went in and I said, could you help me? And we had a circle, and we sent Reiki to me, everyone, and we talked about the result of the treatment, And I went home with a lot more information, but still no decision. So the next day, I was lying in bed most of the day, just in a state. And then I fell asleep and I woke up in the afternoon and I just thought, I'm just afraid. I mean, that's what's happening. I'm afraid of making a decision that's the wrong decision. I'm afraid of making a decision that nobody's going to support. And I'm afraid that the decision I make will put me into something that I am not able to handle. When I realized how much fear was involved in this decision, I just decided that's it. I just have to go inside and do what my heart says. So I laid in bed, gave myself Reiki, and in a few minutes, I just knew that what I needed to do was chemotherapy. And this went against everything, all my principles, everything that I've ever thought about chemotherapy. And I just knew inside that that was my path. So when I went back to the board and said this was my decision, they were really amazed and also very, very supportive. And what I realized for me was the minute that I knew that I had cancer, I also knew that this was my path. But I wasn't willing to really speak my truth. It had to go through this whole process of trying to please other people, trying to make right decisions, which, are not actually possible, except that it has to be right for you. It has to be right for me. So that's what happened, is that I realized that I needed to do this. I also realized that I needed to go to Almaty, Kazakhstan. I didn't know why, but I needed to go, and I planned to have a 3-week trip, including the travel time, which I did, and that put me exactly on the outer edge of when my doctors were happy about starting the therapy. So it solved everything, and I've been home now from Almaty for about 4 days, and in 2 days I'll be starting my chemotherapy treatments. And it is a practice, because one of the things that came out in this whole process of making the decision was an understanding that this was really a path of fire for me. I lie in bed these days and give myself Reiki, and I can feel this energy pouring through my body. And I just feel it's cleansing, but it's also fiery. And I don't know how the chemotherapy is going to be, but I know that there's fire, emotional fire, and there's going to be physical fire, and I have a feeling there's going to be spiritual fire. And I have no idea what that means. I just have this feeling that this is my path and that this is a healing path for me.
She shuffled in the coals and stood. She shuffled in the coals and stood. She shuffled in the coals. She shuffled in the coals. She shuffled in the coals. The fire burns deep. 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 The coals of my heart are burning, a smoldering match burning. The fire burns deep. The fire burns deep. The fire burns deep. I'm walking the fire every day. I'm walking the fire in every way. The fire burns deep. The fire burns deep. The fire burns deep. The fire of truth is in my seed. The fire of truth is all I need. The soul of my heart is burning. I want no more of yearning. I walk in my fire. I walk in my fire. I want my fire. The fire of truth is in my soul. The fire of truth does make me whole. I walk in my fire. I walk in my fire. I want 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 my fire. A wild steed, 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 a wild
Well, these are questions that it was really interesting in Almaty because I really appreciated the students and the masters there. They tried to be very diplomatic, but this was really a set of questions that came from them, and I really appreciated their honesty in asking. I never once have felt that Reiki has failed me. I've gotten so much support from Reiki, from all of the people who have sent me Reiki, and the whole 30 years that I've practiced Reiki, one of the things that I've learned is there is no bad and good. What's important is to accept what's happening. And I've practiced little things, bigger things, things that were emotionally stressful, things that I absolutely didn't want to deal with, but that was good practice for now. And I feel like I was successful in my practice in some way because it was easy to accept once I got over the shock. And do I feel that there's a limitation in Reiki? Well, yes and no. Sometime when I was teaching, one of my students asked me this, and what came to me was that the limitation is in us as human beings. Reiki, universal life energy, is the energy of life. I mean, there is no limitation because it creates and creates the movement of creation everywhere. So whatever happens, I mean, the cancer is a part of Reiki. And that's something that I learned. And also my response to the cancer is a part of Reiki. So that I'm choosing to do allopathic medicine as well as Reiki, as well as herbal remedies and so on, is a part of knowing what I need individually. Now, I've had lots and lots of colleagues and friends who have decided, nope, I'm not going to do surgery, or I do surgery, but I'm not going to do chemotherapy or radiation, or some people do everything and they don't do any Reiki because they're afraid that Reiki grows the cancer, which is not my feeling at all. There were some very interesting things that happened when the surgeon went in to remove my tumor and the lymph node, and I feel that those anomalies in that were caused because Reiki was doing something, and it was inexplicable in medical science, and that's totally fine for me. So the limitation for me is only that we think that somehow we're supposed to be perfect human beings. Like, I realized this when I was talking to some people before I went on my trip, that, you know, in this day and age, it's like we're all supposed to be 100% healthy. Well, we're not. You know, whether we know it or not, we walk around with all of the possible conditions that we can assume in our bodies within ourselves. I mean, it doesn't come from outside of us. It's created from within. So when the conditions are perfect, then whatever the condition is, it comes up. So whether it's ulcers or MS or cancer or bronchial pneumonia, you know, all of those things we have inside of us, and it's our body trying to regulate and create conditions that balance what's happening. So it's a huge lesson in learning what Reiki really gives us, which is not to take the symptoms out, but to understand that our body is a working, moving organism that takes care of itself. And when we're in a position of compromising that, then the body compromises itself by creating messages. So just remembering Thomas More's title, Symptoms Are a Message from the Soul. When I wrote this question in my computer, the word effectivity, it seems to be not a word in the English language. I don't know. It's my spell check was really amazed at this word and couldn't figure it out. But this was a question that happened over and over to me during the student gathering and the master's intensives that I did in Almaty, and also has come to me from many other people all over the world. You know, I used to say Reiki, but actually that's the name of the energy. So we'll go back. I want to go back a little bit and say Usui Shiki Ryoho, our practice, is a way for us to live with Reiki. And Usui Shiki Ryoho is a Japanese healing art. And what I mean by that is that in Japan, they use the word art to mean a lifestyle. So when I think of myself 35 years ago, before I really got into Reiki and the practice, I would have reacted so much differently to this diagnosis than I did now. And through the last 30 years of my practice, what I've realized is that this practice has been highly successful because I'm in such a different place. And this is a kind of test for me on some level of my practice because, you know, when we do our practice every day and, you know, we don't really feel much in our hands, we live with the precepts and we think, gosh, you know, are these really doing anything? We don't really understand it, but what I get is that every day, every month, every year that we're in practice, we take these little baby steps, and they're really baby steps. They're imperceptible, most of them. We change and start looking at the world in a different way. And that art, that practice allows us to, when we come to what we would call crises in our lives, that means that we're able to be present. We're able to make decisions that benefit us, not all the people around us. It means that we're able to speak with ourselves and to gain comfort in our practice and to know that where we are is following, if we might say, our destiny. So, you know, 30 some years ago when somebody said, now you're a Reiki master, and somebody else said, now you're the lineage bearer, I said, now wait a minute. That's not really true. I don't feel that inside. And it was like being plunged into the ocean and saying, swim. And I did, but I did with great resistance, I have to say, but somehow I kept my head above water. And that feeling is not what's happening right now. I'm not keeping my head above water. I'm going with it. And this for me means that I feel like I am a student of a practice, of a healing art that has really changed my life to the point where now I just have the same pieces inside of myself, but somehow they're responding differently, and that's a great thing. The effects that this cancer process has had on my life are range from really uh, just wonderful daily things to a very deep process that's happening in me now. For instance, I have had so much compassionate, kind, and generous support from, just amazing. It's been amazing for me, from people that I haven't heard from in years, thought that I was estranged from them, and, that does happen in our lives. We just kind of take different paths and we're off somewhere else. But they've sent emails, I've had messages, I've had cards and letters, and I knew that people cared and loved me and, supported me. But somehow this was more than that. I don't know how that has happened, but it's been an amazing and wonderful opportunity for me to receive. And this is huge because, it's so much easier to give than receive. So trying to be genuine and say, oh yes, thank you very much. I can't do that because, what I've gotten has been so much deeper than that, that I want my response to be equal to how I feel. And so this particular DVD actually is a part of my response to say thank you. And my family has been tremendous. People have offered time, energy, suggestions, which have all been wonderful. I haven't gotten any letters, maybe thoughts, but no letters saying, you're a failure. Well, I'm hoping that this sharing that I'm doing right now will help you understand that even though it looks like Reiki has failed, possibly, or that I haven't taken care of myself, what's really true is that this is a part of who I am now. And this gift has been my next step in my development. So, I've thought a lot about it because when I came into Reiki, personal development was my big thing. I mean, I didn't really have a significant physical condition that I needed to have help with. My condition was really emotional, psychological, you might say. A dear friend of mine, 35, 40 years ago, told me, Phyllis, you're perceptually handicapped, which meant that my perception of myself was so distorted that it distorted my whole world, and that I couldn't relate to things in a reality because I had so many layers. And this has really changed, and now what I see is that this is the next layer. And the deeper process has been my understanding that in the last 30 years, I have been so busy, planning. If I'm not on the road, I'm planning, my next trip on the road. I was planning 2-3 years ahead in my schedule, and I enjoyed it. I mean, it was wonderful. I have had a great time traveling and so on, and always talking about not traveling, taking more time for myself, and so on. And what I realized was all the reasons were not really the reasons. What I realized is that in these 30 years, my practice of Reiki has been pushing me to address some of the questions that I have inside of myself about myself as a spirit, myself as a spiritual being. And in order to address those questions, to address those issues, I need time, I need space, and I need not just space, like physical space, but I need energetic space. So now what my last few weeks have been about is to get myself physical space, to get myself energetic space, and to get myself emotional space so that I can come to a place that's really been pressing me for the last few years. And I feel like this is a part of the fire that's happening, is that I will be able to burn away some of the things that I need and to find the place of spirit for me. Well, I wasn't embarrassed to ask for Reiki, but I didn't know if I really needed it. Now, isn't that crazy? So, well, I knew right after my diagnosis that I wanted to have support. I wanted to feel people behind me. And so I asked for Reiki. But then when the surgery happened and I started to feel healthy, actually. I mean, after the surgery, it just seemed like I felt healthy. And that was really strange for me. And then I realized there were some really deep things that were happening and that Reiki could really, very much support that. And I never went to embarrassment, which was great. And also felt like a really important milestone for me to recognize that I wasn't embarrassed and that I was open. And that, in fact, this is exactly when I need Reiki. So I'm very happy that it's been that way. And I've been very moved by some of the emails that I've received of other people who have Reiki, who have had cancer or other things that have happened to them and have been embarrassed to ask for Reiki. Please don't be embarrassed. This is the time when it's really needed, and it's a very big use. I realized through this whole process how mental I am. I mean, this is such a shock to me. It's not a shock for many of my close friends and colleagues, but it is for me. So what I realized is that I've really always planned, because I've always researched and gotten to know everything that was going on, and so that I could, have a safe place for myself. And I've done all I can with this next treatment process, chemotherapy. I understand more about what it is now. I've been reassured that this is a very low dose and that many people go to work and have very, very few, reactions to the chemotherapy. But still, there is this huge unknown. Like, how will my body react to these chemicals? And how will the things that I am doing mitigate the side effects? So there's no way that I can find this out. This is like the unknown. And that's a little scary for me. And what I also realize is that there's some gift in this that I absolutely don't understand. I can't wrap my mind around it. I just know inside of myself it's there. And that I'm ready to receive it. But I sure would like to know what it is. So there is this huge fear that's coming up in me. And what I realized just 2 days ago when I was receiving a treatment was that I have been making fear or at least I've seen fear as kind of the enemy to conquer. I know that fear also is a very important strategy for us as human beings. If we didn't have fear, then we wouldn't live very long. But there's something about fear being my ally. And that's the thing that I'm working on right at this moment, is to embrace the fear, is to own it, and to be able to see it as my ally so that I can work with it and accept the gifts that it has to offer. So we'll see. I feel like I'm, in the next 2 days, going to enter into a huge, huge cave with no flashlight, no light, no understanding of where the entrance will lead me. And this is my adventure. So I've got Reiki. That's all I can say.
Listen to my voice and feel the energy. Listen to my words and feel my love to be. It's so easy to be with your angel on the earth, together with your angel, your pilot on the earth. Listen to my story, the story of the pain. You have the same story, all the stories are the same. It's so easy to be with your angel on the earth, together with your angel, your pilot on the earth. Listen to my voice and feel the energy. Listen to my words and feel my love to be. It's so easy to be with your angel on the earth, together with your angel, your pilot on the earth. Listen to my story, the story of the pain. You have the same story, all the stories are the same. It's so easy to be with your angel on the earth, together with your angel, your pilot on the earth. Listen to my story, the story of the pain. You have the same story, all the stories are the same. It's so easy to be with your angel on the earth, together with your angel, your pilot on the earth. It's so easy
I think this is part of the unknown. I have this image for me of, standing where I am now and, looking over this vast desert, which actually reminds me so much of the ocean. And the ocean is a very fearful place for me. I mean, it's really crazy. I'm a very good swimmer. I love water. And the ocean just has this feeling that underneath the waves, there is this vast unknown and lots of really prickly, not so nice things down there. So I see the desert sometimes like that, and the mountains here are a little bit in the distance, and I think, well, my fear is really about what will happen in my journey from here to the mountains. Once I get to the mountains, it's like I can see them. I know that they're there, and I know that I can handle whatever is happening there. So it would be nice for me to be able to figure out what my life's going to look like. But what I know that it's going to be is very different. And it can't be different in the sense of, arranging it or planning it to be different. It has to be different from inside of me. And when I say that, it just touches a place where that's the part that's scary. Like, I'm really comfortable with how I am now. I've got it handled. I know how to get on an airplane. I know how to organize. I know how to be out there. But there are lots of things I don't know, and these are the things that are going to have to come from me. And though I can imagine that I won't travel, I can imagine that I will use our, technology, like over the internet much more, that I want to be able to be with people still in the oral tradition. I have all these things that are going on, but what it will look like, I don't know. And it touches me deeply. When I go back to Andreas Moritz and his theories, and also my own understanding of our physical body and, well, I shouldn't really say physical body, but our being, which includes all the different aspects of who we are. My understanding that we contain everything. In my Reiki practice, what I've realized is that I am everything that I have been from the past. I am everything that I am, future potential, right here and now. So maybe the doctors will say that I'm cured of cancer. And that would be nice. That would give me some emotional and mental security, I feel. But will I ever really be cured? I don't know. I mean, I think that the nucleus of that for me is in the healing part. Can I have enough courage to face the things that I need to change inside myself so that the conditions that created and nourished the cancer don't exist anymore? And this is a huge, huge process. And I have now a year to do this, to make a really good start, let's put it that way. And I always used to think that it had to do with discipline. I would see other people who seemed like they had so much more discipline, like not eating this because it wasn't good for them, or exercising because it was good for them, and so on. And my feeling like, I just don't have that kind of discipline. Well, what I realize now is that it has absolutely nothing to do with discipline. It has to do with whether or not I'm going to listen more closely to my body, listen more closely to what I need, not just on a physical level, but on a spiritual level, and listen more closely to who I am. Who is Phyllis? Not Phyllis the Reiki master, not Phyllis the lineage bearer, not Phyllis the daughter, not Phyllis the the stepmother, not Phyllis the friend, not Phyllis the partner, but Phyllis, the true me. And to come more closely to this place. And this is a time for me of really looking and being with myself. Sounds really simple, but as the old saying goes, a lot easier said than done. So this is my threshold, and this is when I get to do it. Thank you very much for being with me and for listening. I hope it touches your lives somehow. It certainly has been good for me to share this. This is a part of my healing, is to be able to share it with students, to share it with family, to share it with friends, and to be able to witness for myself what this process is bringing to me. So I'd like to invite you to join me again in a little bit of Reiki, just to be with it and to be with ourselves. So. I give thanks for this time and this place to be together, for all the gifts that have been given. Thank you.
This is the gift of myself. This is the song of my life, the song of who I am. And I'm wrapping me up in the water.